When a man chooses to go silent, when he deliberately pulls back and stops initiating contact, the immediate assumption many make is that he's giving up, walking away, or being emotionally immature. But here's where most people misunderstand the true power of silence in relational dynamics. Silence, when used with intention, is not a withdrawal, it's a recalibration. And for a woman, that silence doesn't register as indifference. It is a decision, and it's a decision that says it registers as a signal, a powerful interruption in the pattern. You see, human beings are creatures of narrative. We make sense of our lives, our connections, and our identities through stories. So when communication abruptly halts, especially with someone who previously showed interest or presence, the mind doesn't go quiet, quite the opposite. It becomes more active. The woman who once took your words for granted is now sitting with their absence. And the absence becomes louder than any text, call, or reassurance you ever gave her. This is not about playing games. It's about allowing space for reflection. Psychological space is essential in any meaningful dynamic. When you stop talking to her, you are no longer feeding her a script. You're no longer shaping her view of you with daily check-ins, validations, or explanations. What you're doing, whether you realize it or not, is handing her the mirror. The mirror is the only... You're inviting her to confront the role she's played in the connection and how she feels about your energy no longer being accessible. There's a deep discomfort that comes with silence, especially for someone who is used to your presence. And it's in this discomfort that real clarity often emerges. This is what most people avoid. They want constant contact because they fear what might happen if they've forgotten. But in truth, it is often in your absence that your value becomes most visible. And let's take this a step deeper. Philosophically, silence is not just the absence of noise, it's the presence of self. When you stop talking, you're not just stepping away from her, you're stepping back into yourself. You're reasserting your boundaries, your time, your energy. You're saying, not with words, but with behavior. I don't chase, I don't beg, I don't negotiate self-respect. A woman feels that shift viscerally. It unsettles her because it disrupts the rhythm. She now has to sit in the echo chamber of her own thoughts. Why isn't he texting me? Did I push him away? Was he more important to me than I admitted? These aren't just passing thoughts. They're emotional tremors that shake her certainty. And once certainty is shaken, a new layer of attraction often emerges, not rooted in fear, but in intrigue. This is where the psychological dynamic flips. She no longer feels emotionally safe in your predictability. And ironically, that very unpredictability can create a renewed desire. Not because you're manipulating her, but because desire is born in distance, not saturation. It's in the spaces between connection that longing is formed. So when you go silent, it's not passive, it's not avoidance, it's presence on your own terms. It's offering her the opportunity to come toward you without pressure, without persuasion. And perhaps most importantly, it's letting her feel what life is like without your emotional availability. That awareness alone can be transformative. Don't underestimate the power of quiet. It's in the silence that she begins to listen, not just to your absence, but to herself. And in that stillness, something shifts. She starts to realize you were never chasing her, and she was never investing in you. You were simply giving her a chance to meet you. When a man stops talking to a woman, especially after consistent engagement, it doesn't just create silence, it creates emotional intrigue, a disruption. And it's in this space of not knowing that craving begins to form. This isn't just emotional. This is deeply neurological and psychological. Human beings are wired to seek patterns, to make meaning, and to resolve uncertainty. So when a familiar emotional rhythm is broken, the mind doesn't rest. It becomes consumed. The absence of communication isn't perceived as neutrality. It's perceived as ambiguity. And ambiguity in the emotional landscape is a powerful stimulant. When you are consistently showing up, texting, calling, making plans, your presence became predictable. Predictability has its place, yes, but too much of it breeds emotional numbness. It removes tension, and desire, real desire, needs just enough uncertainty to stay alive. Now let's be precise here. I'm not talking about creating confusion as a tactic. This isn't about being emotionally unavailable or playing hard to get. That's manipulation. What I'm describing is the natural psychological impact of no longer overextending your energy. When you pull back, not to punish, but to preserve, it activates a shift in her nervous system. The part of her that once felt certain of your pursuit now begins to wander. And wandering is where desire starts to wake up again. This space you've created becomes a void, and nature abhors a vacuum. That emptiness doesn't remain empty for long. Her thoughts start to fill it. Why did he stop reaching out? What changed? Is he talking to someone else? Was he more valuable to me than I realized? These are not surface-level curiosities. They emerge from a place of emotional investment, conscious or unconscious, and they begin to build a sense of urgency. There's a paradox here that's worth understanding. When you were giving more, words, attention, energy, she may have felt less. But when you start giving less, she begins to feel more. It seems counterintuitive, but it's consistent with how emotional scarcity works. We tend to value what is limited, what might slip away, what we can't fully grasp. When your energy becomes less accessible, it doesn't make you less attractive. It often makes you more magnetic. Philosophically, there's something deeper at play. When you remove yourself from someone's emotional space, they are forced to confront the truth of their own feelings. No distractions, no noise, just a raw encounter with their own longing. This is where emotional insight often emerges, not when we are flooded with affection, but when we're deprived of it. It's in the absence that we become aware of what once filled us. And you see, this craving doesn't come from you begging for her attention. It comes from you refusing to hand it out carelessly. You've stepped back, not as an act of rejection, but as an affirmation of your value. And that value begins to echo in her psyche in a way your words never could. She may begin to respond subtly at first, watching your stories, liking your posts, sending a just thinking of you message. These are not coincidences. They are probes, signals to test whether the door is still open, whether you're still available. And this is where your strength matters. If you respond too quickly, you collapse the tension. If you remain grounded and shaken and measured, you allow the desire to deepen naturally. This is the moment where a man's silence turns from absence into presence. Not a presence that chases or convinces, but one that draws in. She starts to feel you without needing to hear from you. And that feeling, if allowed to grow, can become far more compelling than anything you could have said. So when you stop talking to her, remember this. You're not creating distance. You're creating a space for her desire to emerge. And in that space, the quiet does what words never could. It makes her realize how much she actually misses you. There's a shift that happens the moment a man stops talking, not out of anger, not out of passive aggression, but out of alignment with his own center. That shift is internal. It's the transition from grasping to grounding, from trying to control the external to taking full ownership of the internal. This is the essence of true masculine energy. And when that energy is reclaimed, something very interesting happens. The feminine begins to move toward it. We often think of pursuit as something that must be physical, visible, calls, texts, plans, effort. But the deeper, more magnetic form of pursuit doesn't start with what you do. It starts with what you are. When a man detaches, when he stops filling the space with words, explanations, or emotional labor, he repositions himself energetically. He stops proving and starts embodying. That shift doesn't go unnoticed, especially not by a woman who once felt entitled to your attention. You see, the masculine in his essence does not chase. He stands, he holds, he protects his time, his peace, his mission. And ironically, it is when he finally detaches from the need for validation or outcome that the feminine begins to feel his presence most acutely. Why? Because she senses the integrity in that silence, the sovereignty. It's that silence which turns sovereignty into a word. Because the minute we sense it, our silence, the quiet strength of a man who no longer needs her to feel like himself. Now, this isn't about withdrawing love. It's about withdrawing the compulsion to seek approval. And there's a profound difference. One is rooted in fear, the other in self-respect. When a man is grounded in his masculine, he doesn't abandon connection. He invites it differently. He speaks or remains silent from a place of clarity. That clarity is rare, and in today's world, it's magnetic. Women are sensitive to energetic shifts. When you detach emotionally, not as a game, but as a genuine alignment with your own truth, she feels it. She feels the absence of the old version of you, the one who overgave, over-explained, over-pursue. And as that version disappears, something deeper appears in its place. A man who is fully himself, whether she responds or not, that energy can't be faked and it can't be ignored. What happens next is rarely loud, it's subtle. She might start to become more curious. She may test the waters with a message or a sudden interest in your life. She may act indifferent on the surface, but internally there's a pull she can't fully explain. This is the feminine response to a shift in polarity. The stronger you are in your center, the more naturally she's drawn to reconnect with hers. This polarity is not about dominance, it's about balance. Masculine detachment is not cold, it's calm. It doesn't punish. It simply refuses to perform. And that refusal is where the feminine reorients. It's where she begins to feel a new kind of attraction, not to the man who chased her, but to the man who respects himself enough not to. And let's be clear, not every woman will rise to meet that energy. Some will retreat, some will resist, but the ones who are emotionally mature, who are ready for real connection, will feel the invitation within your silence. An invitation to come closer, not because she's pressured, but because she chooses to. This is the power of masculine detachment. It creates space, not for distance, but for desire. Not to punish her, but to protect your own emotional integrity. And in doing so, you offer her something no amount of words can convey. The experience of a man who does not lose himself trying to be enough. So when you detach, don't see it as walking away. See it as returning to yourself. And trust that when you stand fully in that space, the right woman will not only notice, she'll feel compelled to step into it with you. Once you stop talking to her, once your voice, your attention, your availability are no longer part of her daily emotional landscape, her behavior will shift. Not immediately, not always obviously, but it will shift. And this shift isn't accidental. It's a direct result of the silence you've created. Silence that isn't hollow, but full of intention, full of boundary, full of masculine presence. Most people think communication is about the words we speak, but in intimate dynamics, some of the most powerful communication happens in what we don't say, in what we withhold, in the restraint we choose, not because we are withholding love, but because we are asserting value. And when a man pulls back with clarity, when he no longer feeds a woman's need for validation or control, he changes the relational field. Suddenly, he's no longer playing the same emotional game. He stepped out of it entirely. That shift disorients her. It removes the structure she had come to rely on, perhaps unconsciously. The man who always initiated, who always responded, who always tried to fix things or keep the connection alive, he's no longer there. And what takes his place is not bitterness, but stillness. Stillness is unnerving to those who thrive on reaction. And because stillness says, I'm no longer participating in something that costs me my peace. And so what does she do? She tests. Not out of malice, but out of instinct. She checks to see if the door is still open. She might reach out casually. She might send a vague message, like, hey, I saw something that reminded me of you. Or she might get more subtle, viewing your story, liking old photos, lingering around your social media in ways that aren't random. She might even blur the way to the next thing to see. These are what I call emotional breadcrumbs. She's not saying it directly, but she's feeling your absence and trying to gauge your response. Now here's the part that requires maturity on your end. Don't rush in to fill the gap. Don't let a flicker of attention pull you back into old patterns. Because her behavior is not yet a commitment, it's curiosity. It's her way of asking, is he still orbiting me? And if you immediately jump to re-engage, you collapse the tension. You confirm that your silence was never rooted in strength. It was simply a tactic. But if you remain grounded, if you let her behaviors come without chasing them, you communicate something much deeper. You say, without saying, I'm not here to be half-chosen, I'm not here to be tested, I'm here for truth, for alignment, and for reciprocity. If that's not available, I'm content where I am. And that, more than any display of passion or pursuit, awakens a woman's deeper awareness. Because now she's not just thinking about you. She's thinking about what your absence says about her own readiness for connection. She's feeling the difference between a man who reacts and a man who remains. She begins to see that your silence wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary. And boundaries, when held with calm authority, speak louder than any declaration of love. This is where true polarity lives, not in manipulation, but in self-mastery. When you stay silent with intention, when you don't flinch at her tests or bend to her breadcrumbs, you give her the opportunity to meet you in a new way, to engage not from a place of ego, but from a place of presence. But that opportunity only exists if you stay silent long enough for her to feel it, to miss you, to reckon with your absence. If the mother pretends to care for you, bows to your willingness, that process takes time. And most men rush it because they're afraid of what her silence might mean. But the man who can sit in that space, who can hold his ground, is the man who becomes unforgettable. So let her shift, let her wander, let her feel, and stay rooted in your truth, because the woman who truly sees you won't just test you, she'll choose you.